Howdy my Totally, it's always two little gamers. We're back with another video. Look, we got someone, he's ready to see the new video. He's ready for the new video. We're gonna get wet over here. Let's get to it.
So licensed video games, they've been around the block. They've been around for a very long time, and this channel is no stranger to licensed games. Over the last few years, I've talked plenty about some of the best licensed games that you can play. Not all of them are crap. There are plenty of bangers, plenty of hidden gems, and games that just never got enough attention. And so today, we're going to be talking about 40 of them. These are 40 of the best underrated licensed games that actually are worth your time. Now, if you've seen any of my underrated licensed game videos in the past, some of this might sound pretty familiar as it's essentially just a compilation. But I thought it would be nice to put all of the games together and have ourselves a nice meaty list here. So, with that, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below of any underrated licensed games that I should check out. And with that, thank you so much. Let's get to all those licensed games. Now, when thinking of underrated licensed games, one that always comes to mind immediately for me is the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game released back in the mid-2000s. Now, we all know SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. That's like the fan favorite when it comes to SpongeBob games. It even got a remake. It's one of the all-time classics when it comes to licensed video games. It even got a somewhat spiritual successor in the Cosmic Shake all these years later. But you know what I don't see a ton of people talking about, at least not nowadays, is the SpongeBob movie game that was released a year later. Maybe it's because this was a movie tie-in game in addition to being a licensed game, but I feel like throughout the years, yeah, this one's been a bit forgotten. It really did only come out a year later and was also developed by Heavy Iron Studios. The game even reuses a ton of assets from Battle for Bikini Bottom, but this is actually a pretty different type of 3D platformer. While Battle for Bikini Bottom was more comparable to like Mario 64, where you were dropped into these kind of big non-linear areas and were told to just collect golden spatulas, the SpongeBob movie game is a much more linear 3D platformer. A majority of the game is get from point A to B. Sure, there are some other side collectibles and challenges that show up, but yeah, majority of the game, get from one end to the level to the next. You play as SpongeBob and Patrick. There's no Sandy here, but they introduced vehicle levels. There's a few levels where you're in the tub, and you even get to drive in the paddy wagon for a few levels. This game very much does follow the SpongeBob movie, which is maybe my favorite movie of all time, so yeah, I might be a bit biased for this game, and it really feels like they hit on just about every point that the SpongeBob movie had. You know, you play those movie games and it feels like they barely even tie into the movie. No, here it really does tie into the movie. Of course, they throw in a bunch of little extras since this is the game, but it does an accurate, great job of following the movie. I think the story's great, SpongeBob and Patrick are great, the game is still funny all these years later, and the game is actually pretty fun. While the game certainly isn't innovative or revolutionary and it does play very similar to Battle for Bikini Bottom, it still controls nice, the level design is pretty decent. SpongeBob and Patrick, while they don't have this crazy robust moveset, the game still very much does take advantage of that moveset to create some interesting enough levels. There's even some set pieces that get thrown in here, there's a boss fight or two, and I actually enjoy the boss fights, even if they are a bit simplistic. The game still looks decent all these years later, and the soundtrack, well, the soundtrack's actually really good in this game, like unironically, the soundtrack is just very well done in the SpongeBob movie game. The game has a decent amount of variety thanks to those vehicle sections. It's got a good pace. It ends before it gets old. There's even some replayability if you want to try to get all the Goofy Goober tokens. You can even do some backtracking once you get some of the later abilities. And yeah, it's just honestly better than you would expect. If you like Battle for Bikini Bottom or a fan of SpongeBob or that original movie, this game, it's kind of a no-brainer. All these years later, it's still one of my favorite licensed games of all time, and while I hope this game could get the rehydrated treatment that Battle for Bikini Bottom got, I really doubt it at this point. There's probably just too many other licenses, or the fact that it was based off a movie from the mid-2000s. Yeah, it's probably never even getting re-released, but one can hope. It's still a good game, and in my opinion, it deserves a playthrough. At least listen to the music. The music, it really is good. And so here we have a game I recently talked about, but I thought it was worth bringing back up, and that is Monster Jam Path of Destruction. This game came out in 2010, and it is based off of Monster Jam, the monster truck show that tours around the entire world. Now, there have been a lot of Monster Jam games released throughout the years. I recently, very recently, ranked all of them, and I think Path of Destruction is one of the very best games. And it feels like pretty much from when this game was released, it just never got the spotlight it deserved. A lot of people just immediately wrote it off as just some kiddie licensed racing game, but anybody who's a fan of Monster Jam or monster trucks in general who's played this game usually has pretty good things to say about it, and that's because it's actually a good driving game. While most Monster Jam games go just full arcade and they let the trucks go wild, doing tons of backflips, crushing dozens of cars, smashing through helicopters and houses, Path of Destruction does not take that approach. It actually takes a bit more of a simulation approach where the trucks are actually decently realistic. You won't be going super fast or off these crazy jumps. You'll be lucky to do a few backflips in the span of a few minutes instead of 3 off of one jump, and it actually really does capture the magic and spectacle of Monster Jam in my opinion. This more grounded, rooted in reality approach makes for a better experience. The game has a world tour mode, which is, as the name implies, a world tour, and you do tons of events and go to dozens of stadiums, and you'll be doing races and freestyles, which is what Monster Jam is known for. And when I say freestyle, we're not making fire beats or anything like that. That is where the trucks do flips and crush cars and do combos and link stuff together. It's not actually that complex. You just want to do cool stuff in the truck. And as for the racing, yeah, it's actually good as well. Since it's all stadium races, it's nothing too crazy. You're not driving through these wild environments. You're not driving through a neighborhood or smashing a bunch of stuff. No, you're going off some basic jumps, occasionally crushing some cars. That's all you really need. As long as the game feels well to control, it actually feels like, you know, you're controlling these big ass trucks, and it's got good physics. In this game, it absolutely has that. The trucks do feel nice. It takes a 2 analog stick approach where the right stick is the back wheels, the left stick is the front 2 wheels, and yeah, it really does feel like you have complete control over every wheel on the truck. This is probably the best controlling monster truck game that I have ever played. I mean it actually does control well, and it does feel like it is somewhat rooted in reality, and when you do tricks, it really does feel like you actually pulled something off. And the collision detection isn't total ass like basically every other Monster Jam game. There's a ton of different trucks to choose through, even though this is a pretty outdated roster. It has really every truck from the time, and there were some good ones in here like Mohawk Warrior. So that was cool, and the game still looks pretty decent even nowadays. I mean, it was a 2010 licensed game. You gotta give it a little credit. At least it doesn't look like total ass. It's kind of remarkable how all these years later, I still think this really is like the best Monster Jam game. I mean, there have been a good amount since then, and none of them have been able to capture the feel or, again, just spectacle of Monster Jam like Path of Destruction. If I was only gonna recommend one Monster Jam game to you, it would be this one. Unfortunately, it is probably eternally locked to the PS3 and 360, since there's just tons of licenses involved with this game, but anyone who's a fan of monster trucks should check this one out if you can. And here we have Godzilla Save the Earth. Now, there have been plenty of Godzilla games that have released, and I've done a few ranking videos on them, but if you ask me what I think like the best Godzilla game is, I'm probably gonna say Save the Earth. Save the Earth really feels like the Godzilla game where they just got everything right. The roster, the feel, the control, the modes, etc, etc. So this is a 3D fighting game, but it's a different type of 3D fighting game where you're walking around giant cities fighting each other. This game, along with Destroy All Monsters, low-key created its own small little subgenre of 3D fighting games where it's just giant monsters fighting each other, and when it comes to that tiny little subgenre, that little bubble, yeah, Save the Earth is probably the best one. You get to choose between a good amount of Godzilla characters, and they all feel relatively different from each other. There's also a ton of fan service when it comes to these Godzilla characters, and a bunch of the moves reference some of those old Godzilla movies. Each one of them has a decent number of moves, but they can also shoot a projectile, and then, yeah, you get to actually really interact with the environment. You can like pick up buildings and throw them and blow stuff up. It really does make you actually feel like, you know, you are a big ass monster destroying everything and fighting another big ass monster. When it comes to the controls, it's very intuitive, it feels nice, and it can even be satisfying at times when you do just these giant ass moves on the other monster and they go flying into the air. Like, yeah, it does feel nice, and it really does have a good pace to it. It's not super fast, but it's also not really slow like, say, Godzilla Unleashed is. It's a nice in-between. When it comes to 3D fighting games in Godzilla, this is the best feeling one. There's also a good amount of stages here that actually do feel different. Some of them don't even have buildings. You're like fighting up in the mountains, and I like the stages here. There's also a bunch of little modes thrown thrown in there. Of course, there is like a normal arcade mode where you play through as each one of the monsters and do a bunch of fights, but there's a bunch of stupid little mini games thrown in there as well, like where you're trying to get the ball in the hoop, and these, while they're not amazing, they're a little distraction. They add some variety, and I've had some fun with them throughout the years, especially in the multiplayer. Speaking of multiplayer, that is absolutely where this game excels. Where I've had the most fun with it is in the multiplayer. Getting some buddies around and everyone just killing each other in this game, yeah, it really is fun. And it's crazy because this game came out like back in the mid 2000s and it had online play. I can't say if it was any good, but it's still impressive nonetheless. This game absolutely needs a re-release with that online play reinstated. It doesn't need like a full-blown remake or anything. The game still looks nice and has a good art style. I just think it should be more widely available. It's such a different type of fighting game that I think it might actually do well, and it's got the Godzilla license behind it, so I think at least some people would check it out. It's probably in license purgatory since I think it was put out by like Atari, and who knows whatever the fuck's going on with Atari. Either way, it is absolutely worth checking out, and unfortunately it's gotten very expensive these days, so an emulator is probably going to be your friend. And so here we have a childhood classic of mine, and that is the Lilo and Stitch game released for the PS1. Now, I know there are plenty of people that are probably like, there was a Lilo and Stitch game on PS1, yes, and it's actually pretty decent. While I'm not going to act like it's anything remarkable, and at times it does have a hard time standing out from other 90s platformers, other licensed platformers, it still is a fun time. The game does follow the movie, or at least it kind of follows the movie, and sees Lilo and Stitch trying to form a relationship and aliens show up, etc. If you haven't seen Lilo and Stitch, go see it immediately. It's one of the best movies ever. Seriously, I really do actually love Lilo and Stitch, so maybe I'm a bit biased for this game, but the story is just kind of there in this game. They throw in a bunch of levels and areas that absolutely were not in the movie at all, but you know what, that's fine. It is a game after all, and if you take a look at this game, you'll immediately notice that it looks very similar to another 3D platformer from the 90s, particularly Crash Bandicoot. Yeah, this is pretty much a Crash Bandicoot clone where you're just moving forward a majority of the time, going from point A to B. There are plenty of 2D sections though, and when you play as Stitch, you can even do a spin like Crash. You switch between Lilo and Stitch, each of them having a few different moves of their own, but they play pretty similar for the most part. The controls and feel are alright. The game does feel a bit slippery and just kind of imprecise at times, but at least the level design is somewhat accommodating. You don't ever have to be like ultra precise with it, but there are certainly a few parts that make me grit my teeth a little. Look, it's nowhere near as difficult as really any of the Crash Bandicoot games, but I remember as a kid this game absolutely wiping the floor with me. And what's funny is I remember as a kid it taking me quite a bit of time to actually beat the game, when in reality the game is super short and you can probably beat it in under a few hours, even on a first time playthrough. At least the presentation, for the time, it was alright. The music is quite charming. The game does have a decent amount of charm, and there is some fan service towards the movie. If you like Lilo and Stitch, if you like platformers, yeah, this one is actually pretty alright. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. For some reason you fight a bunch of golems and it does get a bit repetitive with the boss fights, but I still think this was a somewhat enjoyable experience. I'm not going to act like this is one of those hidden gems you absolutely must play. Every PS1 owner needs to go check out this game. No, it's not that at all. It's just better than I thought it would be. And so here we don't just got licensed games from my childhood, here we actually have a modern game, and that is RoboCop Rogue City, which came out in 2023. Now pre-release I wasn't really sure what to make of this game, but after playing through this entire game, oh, it is so good. Actually, this game is way better than it has any right to be. Taking place after RoboCop 2, the game has its own original story about RoboCop going up against a new gang of people, and the story, while it's nothing special, it really does play up a lot of RoboCop's themes, and I think it actually does a decent job representing RoboCop, not only the character but the world and the setting. And yeah, it's actually alright. Fans of the movies will really like what this game has, but what really sets this game apart is the gameplay. This game absolutely fucks when it comes to the gameplay. It is ridiculously good. This is one of my favorite first-person shooters of the last few years. They completely understood the assignment and what people were looking for from a RoboCop game. Those original movies were pretty visceral and violent, and this game, it absolutely captures that. All of the weapons just feel ridiculously powerful. They're incredibly fun to use. They're satisfying as all hell, especially when you just completely eviscerate an enemy, and this game just has this raw feeling to it where you feel powerful as fuck. Like, there's very few other games where you really genuinely do feel this powerful, and the presentation is great. When you're gunning people down, you're blowing off chunks of their body, you're turning them into literally just puddles of blood, and the game genuinely does look good outside of that. It's a very nice looking game. When it comes to the structure of the game, it's interesting where there's these open areas, and yeah, you could ignore all the side quests and make it a very linear experience, but it's actually worth it to do the side quests as well. There's like a little bit of an RPG mechanic in there where you can level up RoboCop and some of his skills. You can even get a bullet time effect. And again, the game really is just way better than it has any right to be. It's immensely satisfying. The combat really just never gets old thanks to how good it feels. There's a little bit of replayability since you do get to make some story choices, but at the end of the day, this was just an immensely enjoyable experience. Like, I just had so much fun with this game. I really couldn't put it down from the moment I started. I was just like, holy shit, this game isn't just good. It's really good. And I didn't see a ton of people hyping it up outside of that initial release, and nowadays the game is pretty cheap, so if this looks fun at all and you like first-person shooters, just go check this one out. You're not going to regret it. So somehow we made it this far without a superhero game, but that ends here. I have Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, there have been plenty of great Spider-Man games throughout the years. I did a ranking on all of them. And there was a few different games I could have chosen for this list. I could have chosen Shattered Dimensions or Web of Shadows, but I'm going with Ultimate Spider-Man. I feel like throughout the years, this one has just been kind of forgotten, especially compared to the prior game, which was Spider-Man 2, the movie game. And that's a real shame because I think this game is actually way better than that movie game, and I think it actually still is able to provide a lot of fun even nowadays. So this game is very obviously based off of the comics. You can tell just from how it looks, it's based off the comics, and I think it looks great. It has a really solid cel-shaded art style, and when it comes to the story, it very much is comic book inspired, about Spider-Man going up against some of his villains, and you actually get to play as Venom in this game as well. When you're Spider-Man, it's not all that different from the Spider-Man 2 movie game. You're web slinging around the city, you're fighting crime with some really basic combat, and you get to even go up against some famous villains. It's pretty good stuff in this game. While nothing is particularly innovative, it still feels like an improvement on what the Spider-Man 2 movie game did. When you play as Venom though, things are a lot more interesting. He plays more like Hulk, where he can jump super high, you have to eat people to get your health back, and you can really mess people up with some tentacles. Playing as Venom is very unique when compared to just about every other Spider-Man game, and he still feels great to control nowadays. While the combat is rather simplistic for both characters, it still is enjoyable and traversal in this game. Yeah, it's still pretty good. The game has a decent atmosphere and music to it. It's not too long, around 5 or 6 hours, but there is some fun to be had here. I've come back to this game a few times throughout the years, and I feel like every time I come back to it, I appreciate it a little bit more and more. It has actually aged pretty decently. The web slinging really does actually still feel good. Look, it's not Marvel Spider-Man 2 and you're not flying around all over the place, but I like the web slinging. At least this game is still relatively cheap, which is not something I can say about really most Spider-Man games. And so if you like Spider-Man, you haven't tried this one, and what you're seeing here might interest you, might be worth checking out. Maybe. And so here's a game I actually recently played through, and that is Cars 2 for the Xbox 360. I brought it up on my channel before, but I really do love Cars, that original movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's maybe my favorite Pixar movie, and I love the game based off of that original movie. But Cars 2, I just don't really care for that movie at all. That's why I was really surprised when I heard that the Cars 2 game was actually good, but yeah, after playing through it, this game is way better than I thought it would be. It really has nothing to do with Cars 2, the movie at all, taking place after, and it sees Lightning and friends just doing a bunch of simulations. But that's fine with me. We don't need it recreating parts of Cars 2. So what even is this game? At the end of the day, this game is actually a kart racer, and there's actually a decent amount of depth. You can choose between a good amount of cars, and like I said, you'll play through a bunch of simulations. Most of these are races, and in these races there are items, you know, akin to Mario Kart, but there's actually a little bit of skill here. You can drift, you can drive backwards, you can do tricks, and you actually do have to manage your boost here. This game has a decent sense of speed. The controls are actually well done. The tracks aren't super generic. There's different routes and paths to take, and there are plenty of shortcuts, and so it doesn't really get all that old. And surprisingly, this game was actually fun. I was kind of surprised with just how much I was enjoying this, and it's not super easy either. There is a bit of rubber banding AI, and so the game is not a total cakewalk. There's other events besides racing though, like when you're destroying stuff, or you go into these like demolition style areas where you got to destroy other cars, and these, yeah, it's nowhere near as enjoyable as the core racing. but it's not totally awful. The game has a decent amount of variety, and it ends before it truly gets old at around the 4 or 5 hour mark. The game doesn't exactly look astounding, but at the end of the day, I was just happy to walk away from this game and go, yeah, this is actually good. It's a good licensed game. I like that there's a bit of depth here with managing your boost, and it doesn't feel ultra generic. While I am a little disappointed that there's no open world like some of the earlier Cars games, this game is just much better than those in nearly every other aspect. And so to anybody who likes Cars, yeah, Cars 2, at least the 360 version, that's a good one. I can't speak on those other versions, but the 360 one gets a thumbs up from me. And so here's another game I actually recently just talked about, but I think it deserves to be on this list as well, and that is Transformers Devastation. Now, there have been plenty of great Transformers games. When people talk about good Transformers games, they always bring up War for Cybertron or Fall of Cybertron, but I don't hear that many people bringing up Transformers Devastation, and I think this game is just as good as those. Sure, it is a bit different, but this game was immensely enjoyable, at least for me personally. It was developed by Platinum Games, yes, Bayonetta, Nier Automatopoeia, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance Platinum Games, and it absolutely has their style. It's based off of like early Transformers from the 80s. It looks like it, there's a ton of fan service, and it has a really nice aesthetic to it. I love how this game looks. The cell shading is just very on point, and when it comes to the gameplay, yeah, it's a hack and slash character action game, whatever you want to call it. If you've played any of Platinum's games, you'll immediately understand how this game works. It's incredibly satisfying. Fast-paced combat about some robots kicking some ass. You can switch between on foot and into a car whenever you want, complete with that amazing transformation sound, and there's a bunch of combos that have you turning into the car, switching back and forth, and yeah, the combat gets pretty crazy in this game. There's not as much depth as, say, Bayonetta, but it's still pretty enjoyable. There's 4 different characters to choose from, and they all feel very different from each other. Like, even Bumblebee and Sideswipe feel pretty different from each other, and they're like almost the same size. Something else that's pretty interesting about this game is it has a Diablo-style loot mechanic where you get just basically random loot for each of your Transformers, and while this does feel a little out of place, it still is a cool mechanic and provides a little bit of variety. And that's good because you'll be going through some samey looking environments. You spend a lot of time in the city, and there's even some repeated boss fights here, but the game is still pretty enjoyable. It ends before it really does get repetitive or stale, and like all of Platinum's games, the game is rather replayable. You know, you want to get the highest scores, you want to try to get through fights without getting hit, try the other characters, etc, etc. And the music, oh, I could be here all day about the music. The music is just very well done in Transformers Devastation. It's one of my favorite parts of this game. This really is one of the best Transformers games of them all. The game has sadly been delisted, but I have hope that it's going to come back, and I absolutely think it is worth playing. If you like hack and slash games, if you like Transformers at all, you're gonna like what this game is doing. I think that it's not only one of the most underrated licensed games, but it's just a very underrated title in general, and hopefully I can go more than like 2 or 3 videos without talking about it again. Either way, it's a pretty good time. Alright, and here's a game that just doesn't get enough love in my opinion. That is Batman Arkham Origins. Now, I know there are a lot of people that don't really care for this game and its story and think it's far inferior compared to all of the other Batman Arkham games, which, to be fair, I think it is weaker than the main trilogy. But despite all that, I still think it was a good game, and I feel like looking back, yeah, we were a bit harsher on this game than we should have been. I mean, I'd much rather play Arkham Origins over Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League any day. So this game, as the title implies, takes place before all of the other Arkham games. It's when Batman was pretty fresh. He's only like a year or 2 into doing this whole Batman thing, and it sees him going up against a gang of criminals, but of course things change. I know the story isn't everyone's cup of tea, and some people don't like the direction the story takes, and while I kind of agree I don't love the direction the story takes, I still think it was alright. I will say though, it was odd that Batman doesn't have the same voice actor as the other Arkham games, and sadly the voice actor has passed away, so I guess we'll just never be able to have that level of consistency. Story aside though, this very much is a Batman Arkham game. If you've played Arkham Asylum, City, or Night, you'll immediately know how this game plays. You're dropped into a big open world, this time Gotham City, and you get to stop a bunch of crime. There's a bunch of main antagonists to go after, there's some side missions, there's some collectibles like the Riddler trophies, Batman of course can glide around, there's the Batman combat that would low-key revolutionize how combat is in third-person games, and yeah, the combat is pretty solid in this game. They try to add a little bit more depth here with some of the tools. When you're not in combat, you can be stealthy, and take people out one by one. And yeah, the stealth gameplay, it's also pretty well done in this game. Something that Arkham Origins does that Arkham City and Asylum did not do is it focuses a lot more on Batman's like detective side, where you really recreate crime scenes and examine everything, and Arkham Knight would actually bring this over. I think it's pretty good in this game. Something else that I think is actually pretty good that not enough people give this game credit for is the boss fights. This game actually has some really good boss fights. The boss fight against Firefly, the boss fight against Deathstroke, they're actually some of the best in the entire Arkham series, and I know plenty of people were bummed that Deathstroke shows up at the very beginning of the game, but at least it was a good ass boss fight. And so you might be wondering why this game's on an underrated list, but you'd be surprised how many people actually didn't care for this game. And you know, there are certain areas that the game totally is lacking. I don't think the open world is as well designed. The pacing and the storytelling in general is not as well done. The game was actually quite buggy when it came out, and it had a pretty tacked on, just kind of shitty multiplayer. But I don't think any of these issues were massive or game breaking or any reason why you shouldn't really play this game. Sure, it's not as good as the other Arkham games, but so many people have just distanced themselves from this game, acting like it didn't even exist. Oh, it's not by Rocksteady, forget it. Even Warner Brothers has seemingly forgotten it. They brought all of the other Arkham games to modern platforms, but not Arkham Origins for whatever reason. It's just kind of the black sheep, and it feels like it's been a bit forgotten throughout the years. So here I am to say the game's good. It's not amazing. It's not as good as the other Arkhams, but it's an enjoyable time. And so here we got another game from my childhood. We have the Shrek 2 video game, specifically the home console version. Now, Shrek 2, one of the greatest movies ever made. The video game, way better than you'd actually expect. Like I've said for a few of these games, there have been a lot of games when it comes to this franchise. There's been several Shrek games, and a majority of them are ass, but Shrek 2, this game is actually good. I grew up absolutely loving this game, and I came back to it a few years ago to rank every game based off of Shrek 2, and I thoroughly enjoyed this game still. It actually holds up incredibly well. So what kind of game even is this? It's a 4-player brawler, yes, like an actual beat 'em up, where you can play through the entire game cooperatively and you really just beat the shit out of everything. If you don't have anybody to play with you, you'll have bots to join you, and you can freely switch between all of the characters. There's a good amount of characters here. It's not just like Shrek, Donkey, Fiona, and maybe Puss in Boots. No, they got a bunch of other Shrek characters in here. And they're all somewhat different from each other. Each one of them really has a special ability or two that actually, you know, makes them distinguishable from each other. Who you're playing as matters even a little bit. And then yeah, you just go beat the absolute piss out of everything. Whether it's angry people or creatures or trolls or monsters, whatever, you just beat everything up. While the combat is very simplistic, it is a one-button beat 'em up, it still is enjoyable, if not a bit mindless. Thankfully, there are a few things that do mix up the gameplay. You'll solve very rudimentary, easy puzzles, and there are some mini-games that show up. At the end of every level, you have a hero time moment where you get to do something by yourself, and this, yeah, it is more like an actual little mini-game, and all of this does provide enough variety to the point where I wouldn't say the game really gets stale. It's also rather short, around the 5-hour mark at most, so the combat, it doesn't really wear out its welcome. The game follows Shrek 2, or at least kind of follows Shrek 2, but of course they throw in a bunch of extra things to, you know, extend the game out a little bit. There's a bunch of sequences and areas that absolutely were not in the movie. Trust me, I know some of the movie by heart. I can even recite the lines. Some of this shit did not happen, but it's okay. It'll all be ogre before you know it. The game has a good pace to it, and yeah, I still enjoy it all these years later. There's actually some collectibles if you want to try to get everything, and I still think it is surprisingly good. I don't hear like anybody talking about this game. Even when talking about the best Shrek games, I rarely hear this game brought up, and I don't really know why. I can't think of any other Shrek games that are better than this, to be honest. Like, there are some half-decent games in there, but Shrek 2, at least the home console version, yeah, I've absolutely loved this game, and even though it's super simplistic and basic for the most part, yeah, I've just never really not had a good time with it, and you can play the entire game with friends. How is that not cool? Either way, if you like our big green friend, or maybe you want to get hyped for Shrek 5, there's no better game to play than Shrek 2. And so here's a game that's had a bit of a resurgence as of late, and that is X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, before the latest Deadpool movie, you could find this game pretty cheap, but nowadays, yeah, it really has shot up in price, and I think that's because a lot of people not only have nostalgia for Wolverine and Hugh Jackman, but they realize that this game is actually hella good. Now, X-Men Origins Wolverine, I remember seeing it way back when and thinking it wasn't particularly very good, but I saw the game at GameStop on like the bargain shelf for like under $5, and so I decided to check it out and was pleasantly surprised. In fact, I would actually say this is one of the best superhero games like ever. This game goes absolutely nuts and has barely anything to do with the movie. Like, at times it follows the movie, but for the most part it just kind of goes off the rails and does its own thing. The game is actually rated M also, so they really let Logan just go all in here. The game is a hack and slash character action game, whatever you want to call it, that's very similar to other hack and slash games from the late 2000s, and like I said, the game is rated mature, so they just let you go in with the ripping and the tearing. You are absolutely just shredding people in this game. A majority of the game is flashbacks in like Vietnam, and you'll see Wolverine just jumping all around, ripping and tearing people in half, throwing people into helicopter blades. It's bloody, it's violent, but most importantly, it's fun. Sure, the combat doesn't have a ton of depth to it, and it is rather basic at times, but it's satisfying and it's always a good time. This game also has some really great set pieces. Like I mentioned, you're throwing people into helicopters, which really just never gets old, but there's actually some really cool boss fights in here with other X-Men characters that aren't even in the movie. Like, you actually fight a Sentinel in this game, and this is awesome. You fly through that fucker's head. And believe me, that's all I've wanted to do since playing MVC2 online. I swear, everybody's Sentinel. Anyway, unrelated topic, the boss fights are really great. There's some really cool set pieces. There's actually some fan service here, and you can get some different costumes for Logan. The level design, it gets the job done, and the game has a good amount of variety. There's some replayability here, and throughout the years I've come back to this game, and every single time I come back, it's like coming back to an old friend. It's always a good time. This is easily the best Wolverine game, and we'll see if Marvel's Wolverine can really live up to this one. You know, the one by Insomniac Games, the people that laid me off. Well, that game's not coming anytime soon, but we're always going to have this game. It really has shot up in price thanks to Deadpool 3, which is a shame, but if you see it cheap anywhere, this is one that is totally worth getting. So here we got certainly a mouthful of a title. We have Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game. This is based off of the 2005 King Kong movie by Peter Jackson. And I feel like this really has gone down as one of the more underrated licensed games. It was actually developed by Ubisoft, and you know, they were low-key cooking with this one. While I think the Peter Jackson movie is alright, the game, oh, this is a good one. So the game actually accurately follows the movie. It sees our man Jack coming to this mysterious island and getting involved with the world's greatest monkey that isn't named Donkey Kong, and surprisingly, all of the movie talent actually reprises their roles here, like Jack Black's here, Adrian Brody's here, and that's pretty cool. But where this game really shines is in its gameplay. It takes place from a first-person perspective, and for the most part, it's a survival game where you're actually managing some resources, you get to spread fire, and you fight off a bunch of dinosaurs. Sure, it's not as complex as, you know, modern-day survival games. You're not managing your food, your water, your stamina, etc., but you still have to manage some stuff here, and you'll get into some pretty scrappy fights with these dinosaurs and other creatures in general. It's kind of funny. As a kid, I didn't really care for this gameplay. I was like, man, why am I managing these stupid sticks? I don't want to do any of this. But I come back to it now and I'm like, this game was a little ahead of the time, wasn't it? You don't only get to play as Jack though, you do actually get to play as the world's biggest monkey. And here it's more like a beat 'em up where you just beat the shit out of some dinosaurs, and there are some pretty sweet executions here. Kong can really mess these dinosaurs up. The Kong sections, while they aren't particularly long, they certainly mix up the game and add some much needed variety. Otherwise, you're just kind of sticking spears into dinos' mouths. But at the very least, there are some really cool set pieces in this game, and the end of the game in particular is actually pretty good. I'm sure everybody knows what happens at the end of the movie, but the end of the game, yeah, it's pretty awesome also. While the game isn't super long, and there's not really any reason to go back to it after you've beaten it, it still is one of those more enjoyable, underappreciated licensed games that might be worth your time. If you're a fan of the movie, or maybe you saw one of the newer Kong movies and you're like, you know, I kind of want Kong in a game, well, this is a lot better than Kong Skull Island. We'll see if any of those newer King Kong games are able to be better than this one, but as it stands, this is the best of the King Kong games, and this game is much better than I think most people would expect. I also want to specify I only am familiar really with the GameCube and 360 version. I know there's plenty of different versions of this game, and I can't speak on all of those. The GameCube and 360 version, those are good. Hulk Ultimate Destruction. I gotta say, being a Hulk fan the last 10-15 years, it's been a bit weird. In the 2000s, Hulk was like insanely popular. He was probably in the top 5 most popular Marvel characters of them all, with Spider-Man and Wolverine, but nowadays I feel like he just isn't as popular. Maybe it's because he never got his own movie or all the issues with Universal, but what I'm trying to say is we aren't hulking out like we used to. This game though, oh yeah, it's hulking out. The developers knew exactly what they were doing when they were making this game. And what they've made here is not only the best Hulk game by a wide margin, but one of the greatest superhero games of them all. This game just kicks some serious ass. It's actually an open world game that sees Hulk just whooping ass. You play exclusively as Big Green Machine Hulk. You never actually play as Bruce Banner. Good, get that shit out of here. We don't want to play as him. We want to play as the Big Green Machine, and yeah, you get to just destroy shit in this game. Hulk can jump super high. He can rip cars up and turn them into boxing gloves. And speaking of which, you actually get to just rip a bunch of shit up. You get to rip shit up and turn it into weapons. You get to throw stuff. You get to beat shit up, and you fight plenty of Hulk bad guys. You're fighting Hulkbusters. You're fighting Abomination. You're fighting all of the Hulk villains here. It is very much a comic book story where really it is just set up so Hulk fights as many of his villains as he possibly can, and that's all you really want. The combat is satisfying, every fight's a spectacle, and really, all these years later, there's just never been another Hulk game like it. There was a Hulk game for like PS3, but that game, it was just a pale imitation compared to what Ultimate Destruction was doing. This game, it has Ultimate Destruction. It's even got like a wanted system, kind of like GTA, and they're not fucking around in this game. It actually gets mad difficult. But Hulk gets like all of his abilities, and you really just start to absolutely annihilate everything, especially by the end of the game when you just become incredibly powerful. This game just lets you feel like Hulk. You actually get to feel super powerful. It's satisfying, and all these years later, yeah, it's really just a great time. This game absolutely deserves a re-release. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I'm hopeful maybe Disney can figure something out so that more people can play this game. But I don't know if it's ever going to happen because it seems to me that Disney just doesn't really give a shit about the Hulk. I mean, we never got a Hulk MCU movie, and it feels like they always kind of neutered him in the later Avengers movies. But hey, at least we got one kick-ass game like this. This game rules. Now, when conversations crop up about licensed games, a usual suspect is LEGO games. There have been plenty of LEGO games based off of licensed properties, whether it's Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Batman, etc. And so I wanted to include a more underrated LEGO game here. And for today's video, I decided to go with LEGO Dimensions. Yes, the Toys to Life LEGO game. Now, if you don't remember Toys to Life, it was a really big fad in the 2010s, starting with Skylanders, and then there was Disney Infinity, and LEGO had their own version with LEGO Dimensions. I never really got into Skylanders or Disney Infinity, but LEGO Dimensions, I actually got quite into this one. I really did spend like a good $300 or $400 on this game because I really was enjoying it. Maybe it's just sunken cost fallacy at this point, but I thought this game was better than what most people gave it credit for. When it comes to all of the LEGO games, I think this is one of the better ones. Sure, a lot of the game really is centered around the mechanic of switching out characters. You literally have to sit in front of the pad and physically move the characters onto it to play as them. And at times that could feel a little annoying, but outside of that, I really think this game has some of the best levels of any LEGO game, and there's actually a ton of fan service here. Instead of really just focusing on like one brand or franchise, this game has dozens of franchises, and it gives them all the same care that they would give to really any other LEGO game. And it isn't like that new Funko game where it's just a bunch of odd choices for franchises. No, it was actually some good shit here. I remember that first wave had like Portal, DC, Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, Simpsons even. That was pretty cool. And then the later waves had some good stuff also, like Harry Potter, Scooby-Doo, Gremlins. There was actually some good IPs in here, and they really did give them care. It didn't feel like just a soulless cash grab getting thrown about in here like that Funko game kinda does. I'm gonna have to talk about that Funko game soon enough because I got some beef with it. What I'm trying to say though is that LEGO Dimensions really utilized its IPs, and it actually had some good gameplay. There's some good levels in here. If you've played any LEGO game, you'll immediately understand how this works, and sure, it doesn't, recreate the wheel for LEGO games, I guess the brick in this case, but as someone who has always enjoyed LEGO games, yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. I put a lot of time into this game, well over like 50 or 60 hours, especially because I bought so many of these freaking toys. And yeah, now I just have this giant container full of toys somewhere in my parents' garage. But hey, at the very least, I did enjoy this game when I was playing it pretty consistently. Nowadays, I don't really know how you're supposed to play it. It's not exactly the most accessible. Yeah, it's on modern consoles, but like you got to go get all the physical stuff for it too, like all of the toys. And these were starting to get pretty pricey. I imagine they're still relatively pricey. The last one I got was the Sonic the Hedgehog level pack, and I remember it was like $20 then. I can't imagine how much it is now. While unfortunately it's not the most accessible, hopefully in the future somebody can make some way that this game is more playable or available, or maybe you can switch between characters on the fly and somebody's got some unlock button or something. I don't know. They'll have to find some way. There's a ton of IPs. I hope it isn't lost to time, but we will have to see. This is one of those games where I feel like you kind of had to be there when it was popular to be into it, and nowadays it's just kind of a forgotten little gem that I think was pretty good and better than what most people gave it credit for. And we have the Simpsons game that was released in 2007. Now, when you talk about Simpsons games, everybody always goes to Hit and Run immediately. It's one of the greatest licensed games of all time. It absolutely deserves a remake. But you know what? I don't hear that many people talk about this Simpsons game. It came out around the time of the movie, but actually has nothing to do with the movie, and I think it's one of the best Simpsons games, but that's not really saying much since a majority of them are just absolutely awful. And while this game wasn't all that well received when it came out, I think nowadays it is decently underrated. It stars the Simpsons family, Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie, who find out that they're actually part of a video game and are given superpowers to resolve, well, several situations. The game is very meta and breaks the fourth wall several times, and there's plenty of relatable moments here, especially if you were a gamer back in the 2000s. And at the very least, the game is actually funny. It has that Simpsons sense of humor. It looks like the show. In fact, when it comes to the in-game graphics, I like how this game looks. The cell shading is actually pretty good, and they nail the feel and aesthetic of The Simpsons in general. When it comes to the gameplay, it is a little all over the place. Sometimes it's a platformer, sometimes it's a brawler, sometimes there's like puzzle elements to it. The game has a few different styles of gameplay to it, and there certainly is a lot of variety. All of the characters do play different from each other. They all get special abilities, and they all have their own little quirks. Something all of the characters sadly share, though, is a pretty poor camera. I remember a lot of people lambasted it back when it came out, and all these years later, yeah, the camera's pretty awful in this game. The game, at times, it feels a bit rough around the edges, and it is rather short, but it's still an entertaining experience, which at the end of the day, that's what a Simpsons game should be. It should be entertaining. The gameplay, while not the most refined, still has some great moments and set pieces to it, and the game is genuinely funny. There's some really great cutscenes in here, and all these years later, it's still got me cracking up. But I feel like a bunch of people just wrote it off as another terrible Simpsons game, and this really would be like the last Simpsons game we would get outside of any mobile games. Well, at least the game wasn't total ass. I played it back when I was younger. I enjoyed it then. Nowadays, I still think it is good, but I can agree that it's not amazing. I'd still would say, though, it's an underrated time. So even though this list is in no particular order, the game I wanted to talk about first is the Mad Max game that came out 10 years ago now. So I very much remember when Mad Max released. It was the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5, which seemed kind of like a death sentence. And here we are 10 years later, and I think most people have forgotten about the Mad Max video game. And that's a shame, because I thought it was one of the best licensed games of the 2010s. It's actually quite good. The game isn't a tie-in to any of the movies. It tells its own unique story, and as for the Mad Max movies, I quite enjoy the movies, especially Fury Road. That one's awesome, and I've always thought that there's potential for a Mad Max game, and I feel like for the most part, this game actually realizes it. It was developed by Avalanche Software, not Hogwarts Legacy Avalanche, Just Cause Avalanche. And it follows a pretty similar structure to the Just Cause series. Obviously, you're not flying around and blowing everything up, but it drops you into a pretty large open world with plenty of things to do. Of course, there's the main story, which is about Max trying to get his car back and taking out those who wronged him, but he's joined by this little companion known as Chum Bucket, who never ceases to be a character, I'll just say. I thought he was quite entertaining. I thought the story was fine for what it was. Where this game really shines, I think, is the open world and the combat. While it certainly doesn't reinvent the wheel for open world games, especially for the 2010s, I think it's refined and it's good at what it does. There's actually two types of combat. There's the car combat and the hand-to-hand combat. When it comes to the hand-to-hand combat, it's very similar to the Batman Arkham games, and even though it's lacking in originality, I still think it's actually good. It's satisfying, it's crunchy, it's meaty, and it's genuinely well put together. I wouldn't say it's challenging, but I certainly had some fun with it. When it comes to the car combat, I know some people didn't love this, and that the cars can feel a bit floaty, but I always thought it was a fun time. You have a number of tools at your disposal to take out other cars. You'll be ramming them, and you'll even get into some pretty high-speed chases that are very reminiscent of the movies. During the main missions, there are plenty of fun moments and set pieces where you get just swarmed by other cars and you gotta take them all out, and I think the main campaign of the game is actually quite good. The game has good pacing. You're constantly making your car and Max himself better and better. You're going to different environments. There's tons of little set pieces and moments in these main missions. It's enjoyable. As for the side content, yeah, it is a bit more cookie cutter, and it feels more like Ubisoft side content than anything else, but I just really enjoyed the side content in this game for some reason. I actually did all of it. This is one of the rare games that I've 100%ed and just had a great time. I remember it took me over like 30 or 40 hours to do everything, but yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. I also really like the game's presentation. I think it still looks good nowadays. The desert effects were incredible, and I loved how the skies looked in this game. Something about the skies. I just really enjoyed the atmosphere of this one. While I know this game wasn't for everyone, and plenty of people went, oh, it's just another generic open world game with some license attached to it, I actually thought this one was good, and here we are like 10 years later. The game is absolutely dirt cheap and seems like it's been just totally forgotten. That's a shame. I think the game's worth playing. Maybe one day we could actually get a sequel, but I really doubt it at this point. Either way, it's worth playing. There are plenty of great Looney Tunes games. I know that people have been conditioned to think that all Looney Tunes games are bad, thanks to people like AVGN, but trust me, there are plenty of good ones, and the one that I'm talking about today is one that really doesn't get enough love, and that is Sheep Raider for the PS1. This is one of the more obscure Looney Tunes games since it's based off of Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog, who didn't have a ton of episodes and are some of the more forgotten Looney Tunes characters. When I was a kid, I saw a few episodes of theirs and I didn't really get it. It wasn't until I was older where I was like, oh, they clock in and out like it's a 9 to 5, only the wolf is trying to get the sheep and the sheepdog is stopping him from getting the sheep. And this game is pretty much that. You play exclusively as Ralph Wolf and your objective is to just try to get the sheep, and of course the sheepdog is here to stop you. And so you might be wondering, what kind of a game even is this? It's actually a puzzle game. Despite the perspective, despite what you might think, yeah, it really is a puzzle game. You got to try to figure out how you can get the sheep away from the dog, and you usually got to use some kind of Acme product or some convoluted, way too complex of a method to try to get the sheep. When I was a kid, I didn't really understand this game. I remember getting lost, confused, and just not understanding what kind of a game this is. I came back older as an adult and went, wow, this is actually really well designed. I was just fascinated by this game. There's actually plenty of good puzzles here. The presentation is excellent and the music is low-key goated. I heard someone say once that it sounds like it belongs in porn, and you know, maybe it does, but I think the music is so good in this game. I've been listening to it for like 15 years. I'm not even exaggerating or being hyperbolic here. The music is just genuinely really good. I'm gonna play it throughout this whole video. You'll hear the music. It's what stuck with me all these years, but the game is actually worth playing, especially if you like Looney Tunes or puzzle games. Trying to figure out how to get the sheep away from the dog, it's always pretty entertaining. You'll have to do some pretty convoluted, goofy things, and you might need a walkthrough from time to time, but I think there's actually some well-designed puzzles here, and I think the game at certain points was actually a little ahead of its time, where I was like, huh, they were quite experimental with this one, but I think it pays off for the most part. And of course, with it being, you know, Looney Tunes, there's plenty of goofy, stupid moments, whether it's in the cutscenes or in gameplay, and I think that the game actually takes advantage of the Looney Tunes world and brand. And they certainly do play it up that you're basically playing as just a reskinned Wile E. Coyote. I always thought that was weird about this cartoon. It basically was just a reskinned Wile E. Coyote. The only difference was his nose. The only unfortunate thing about this game is that it has never been re-released. I bought my copy a long time ago. I don't even know if it works anymore, but I imagine the game is quite pricey now, so maybe try it on an emulator. But if you like Looney Tunes or you like puzzle games, this is a good one. So here's one I could never give enough love to, and that is the Punisher video game. This one was developed by Volition, like Saints Row and Red Faction Volition, and is actually a pretty solid third-person shooter. It stars the Punisher doing what he does best, punishing people. Yeah, you're taking out the Kingpin in this one, and it's a pretty fun time. It's a good third-person shooter. The weapons feel nice enough. There's a good sense of impact. It's satisfying, and you can really maim some people in this game. While the guns and projectiles will do a great job at taking people out, you actually get to do some finishers and executions in this game, and these are just brutal, especially when you're interrogating people, and if you just fail the interrogation or you just totally maim them, like, yeah, these are some of the most violent deaths you'll find in any video game, especially from the 2000s. They actually had to censor the console versions due to them being so graphic, and yeah, they certainly are. There's a few kills in this game that wouldn't be out of place for a Saw movie. Like, it gets that extreme. But hey, it certainly is fun, especially when the Punisher goes into like this rage mode and you can just start killing people left and right. Yeah, that's a good time too. The game is extremely linear and it really is just a shooter. There's nothing else you're really doing in this game, but I think it's a pretty good time through and through. It ends before it gets repetitive, it's got good pacing, you go through plenty of different environments. Other Marvel characters do show up here. There's a lot of Punisher fan service, and I think it's one of the more underrated third-person shooters of the 2000s. You wouldn't expect the Punisher game to be this good. Like, sure, at times it can feel a little bit like a Max Payne clone, and I wish the game was a little bit longer and had better boss fights, but I still found it to be a rather enjoyable, entertaining experience. If you like the Punisher, you're gonna like this one, and this is comic book like early 2000s Punisher, not whatever the Punisher has become nowadays. This is one I grew up with. It is The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, the video game. Now, I loved the show growing up. I thought it was just so weird and twisted and was just incredibly memorable. So when I saw that there was a video game, oh, I knew I had to check it out. And I loved this game as a kid. I had never played anything like this. And the funny thing is, I come back to it nowadays as an adult and I'm like, oh, this is a Power Stone clone. But you know what? The game actually is still pretty decent. So do you remember Power Stone from way back in the Dreamcast days, that Capcom 3D arena fighter where you could freely walk around areas and pick up items and weapons and just, beat the crap out of each other? Well, this is very similar to that, only with Billy and Mandy characters, environments, items, etc. When it comes to the character roster, it's actually rather impressive. They have like every character from Billy and Mandy, even characters that only showed up in a few episodes. I remember thinking the roster was just incredible, and I look back now and I'm like, yeah, it was actually pretty good, and they all have different moves. Sure, the fighting in this game is about as complex as the puddle you stepped in the other day, but everyone at the very least does have a unique moveset. And when it comes to the stages in this game, oh yeah, tons of fan service. You go to several different locations from the show, and all of them are very different from each other, and the stages actually do have a real effect on the battles, with certain hazards and power-ups showing up during certain ones. There are items in this game, and the items are actually quite fun to use, and you'll just be beating the absolute snot out of each other in this game. There's some single player content, there's like an arcade mode, and plenty of unlockables, but this game, like most fighting games, really shines in the multiplayer. This is a great party fighter, like how Power Stone was, and I have memories with this game that I am never ever going to forget. While the game isn't exactly swimming in depth, complexity, or nuance, and it does get old after the first few hours, I still think the game is good even nowadays, and is genuinely one of the best Cartoon Network games to come out ever. If you're a fan of the show or this kind of fighting game, you might enjoy this one. So here's a new one that is more well known, but I feel like it is still underrated, and that is Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. So this is obviously based off of the Warhammer 40k license, and while there have been plenty, and I mean plenty, of incredible Warhammer 40k games, I truly believe that Bolt Gun is one of the best. And one of the reasons I feel like the game doesn't get as much love as other Warhammer games is because it is not a strategy game whatsoever, when obviously Warhammer is a tabletop series. No, Bolt Gun is an old school first person shooter, a boomer shooter if you will, where you move around the map lightning fast, you do not regenerate health, you can carry just a ton of weapons at once, and the game has you blasting everything in sight. If it moves, you need to kill it in this game. You're dropped onto this planet and are pretty much told to just annihilate everything, and that's exactly what you're going to do. When it comes to the weapons, oh, it is fantastic in this game. They all feel absolutely incredible. Not only are they very faithful to the source material, but they all feel different, and there's not a bad weapon here. They all just feel phenomenal, and the way you blow shit up in this game, it is just such a good time. I love the weapons, I love the screen shake, it's immensely satisfying. The enemies just get blown to chunks. The enemies can also put up a good fight, but the combat is just so good in this game. It's visceral, it's fast, challenging, and above all else, it's just incredibly engaging. I was having a great time from start to finish with this game. I love boomer shooters, especially when I've had like a long day at work, and this game is perfect for that. If you want to just come home and start ripping and tearing and destroying everything in sight, look no further than Bolt Gun. The level design is actually pretty good also, even if it is just key hunting, and the game has a stellar atmosphere and vibe about it. It totally understands what kind of a game it is, and leans very heavily into it. I would say that it's one of the more underrated FPS games of the 2020s. If you like Warhammer Shoot, even if you don't like Warhammer but you like FPS games, you're gonna enjoy this one. I can't imagine somebody disliking it. It was just a joy to play from start to finish. Okay, so from that violent game to a much more peaceful game, here we have the Emperor's New Groove game on PS1. Now, I love Emperor's New Groove, one of my favorite movies of all time, maybe my favorite Disney movie ever, along with Lilo and Stitch, and so naturally I was given the game as a child. Actually, I was given the demo as a child. It was on the Emperor's New Groove DVD, and I remember playing that demo over and over and over. It wasn't until I was a little older that I actually played through the whole game, and yeah, it's actually a pretty decent 3D platformer. It is a bit reminiscent of the times, and it certainly looks, feels, and plays like a licensed kids game, but I still think the game is alright. Kuzco controls just fine. His moveset, even though it's rather basic, is okay. The level design doesn't do anything too complex, but it gets the job done, and the game does follow the movie. It actually follows the plot of the movie rather well. Of course, it makes up a few things here and there since this is a video game after all, but I think it gets the job done. There's plenty of moments where you aren't platforming, where you're actually doing something else, like when you're tied to the tree and you gotta try to get down the river, or when you're in the little roller coaster ass card. And I remember as a kid I thought these were like stupid difficult. Nowadays though, I'm like, yeah, these aren't difficult at all. But hey, at the very least there's actually some variety to this game, and I think the game has nice music and an okay atmosphere. It's certainly not a looker for a PS1 game, but it looks a bit better than the Lilo and Stitch game. It probably is better than the Lilo and Stitch game. I got a lot of love and nostalgia for that game, but Emperor's New Groove, this game's alright. It won't wow you, and it isn't some must-have secret hidden gem for the PS1 that nobody's ever heard of that you absolutely have to drop everything to play, but it's still a fun little game. So here's a game I've always had a lot of love for, and that is 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. So if you don't know 50 Cent, well, he's a guy that made some beats, some tunes, he made some raps and rhymes, and he actually was part of 2 video games. The first one, Bulletproof, I didn't think was all that good, but Blood on the Sand is much more what I was looking for, and what you have here is one of the most over-the-top third-person shooters you will ever play. So the game is about Fiddy and his crew, the G Unit, in, I guess, the Middle East, and he's going to be paid for these concerts with a jewel-encrusted skull. Yeah, not money, not checks. This nice-looking skull, when it gets stolen by terrorists, I guess, and so it's up to Fiddy to get his skull back. Yeah, it's about as ridiculous as it gets, and when it comes to the gameplay, it's a very over-the-top Gears of War style third-person shooter where you're constantly going into cover and popping out to take out someone here and there. But you know what? It's actually rather fun. The shooting feels way better than it should, the weapons are somewhat satisfying, the AI aren't dumb as rocks, and the game is a fun point/combo system. There's even a swear button, or I'm sorry, taunt, where Fiddy will make fun of whoever he's fighting. As you play through the game, you actually can get upgrades for Fiddy, you can even get more taunts unlocked, and yeah, it might seem rather silly and ridiculous at times, but the game totally plays it up. It knows how stupid it is, and it just goes hard with it. There are some crazy set pieces and areas in this game, and I found it all to be wildly entertaining. Is it incredible? Is it the most highbrow stuff? Absolutely not. The boss fights are a joke. You just fight like helicopters over and over. The game isn't very long, and it's ultra linear. But damn it, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a good ass time playing this. I've gone back to this one more than once because it's just such a fun time, and the music's actually really good since, you know, it's 50 Cent and he actually made the music himself. I really like the music to this game. I know you wouldn't expect it, but I like the music. I like this game in general. Unfortunately, the game has gotten like stupidly expensive. I think I paid less than $5 for this, and yeah, for some reason it's just shot up in price. I hope this game gets re-released. I think it absolutely deserves to be re-released, and I hope Fiddy can do whatever he needs to make that happen. The game's way better than you would expect, and I think it is rather underrated. So here's one people might say isn't underrated, but I think it is still a little underrated, and that is the Warriors for the PS2. This was developed by Rockstar, as in, you know, Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption Rockstar, and a huge love letter to that original Warriors movie. It is also technically a movie tie-in game. Now, if you've never seen the movie The Warriors, it came out in 1979, and it actually is quite good. I think it's aged well, and there's lots of memorable moments to it.
Warriors, come out to play.
And I think that's what makes it all the crazier that like 20-something years later, Rockstar decided to make a movie tie-in for the game, and then it's actually mad good. The game not only follows the movie, but it also provides a prequel story that leads up to the movie to create just a really great experience. A lot of the actors actually came back, And I think the voice acting is really solid here. The story's good, and then when it comes to actually playing it, yeah, it's a good beat 'em up. This is a great beat 'em up that I feel like is never in the conversation for best beat 'em ups of all time. It really actually is that good. I know people immediately go to like some of the TMNT games or Streets of Rage, but no, the Warriors, this might be the greatest beat 'em up game you could ever play. It's not a hack and slash, it's not a character action game, there isn't tons of crazy combos or depth to this combat. It's just a good old-fashioned button masher where you beat the shit out of everything, and yeah, it's a real good time. The game's got a good length to it, the pacing's really solid, it can get challenging, there's plenty of awesome set pieces and moments, the level design is decent, the cops are gonna kick your shit in, but more important than anything else, it's just a really fun time. And of course there's multiplayer because it's a beat 'em up. Even if you've never seen the movie, you know nothing of the movie, but you like this kind of video game or you like Rockstar games, I think this is worth trying. It has actually been re-released as well. You don't gotta bust out the PS2 or the original Xbox to play this one, it is widely available on PS4. And I believe that throughout the years, the game has just been kind of forgotten about. You know, a lot of Rockstar's other games from this era are still looked back on very fondly, Manhunt, Midnight Club, and of course the older GTAs, but nobody's ever talking about the Warriors. So I will and just say, Warriors, come out and play.
Warriors, come out to play.
So here's a more modern game with the Patrick Star video game that came out in 2024. You knew I had to include a SpongeBob game on here somewhere. Well, I'm including this one. It came out last year to pretty much no fanfare, and I don't think I've really heard a single thing about it since it released. Look, the game's not incredible, it's not one of the best SpongeBob games of all time, and it's certainly no Battle for Bikini Bottom, but what you have here is a goofy, silly, stupid little game that I think will provide a few hours of entertainment. The game is probably best compared to Goat Simulator, where you play as Patrick in this open world and you pretty much just do whatever the hell you want. And for a Patrick game, could you really ask for anything else? You talk to other Bikini Bottom residents like Squidward, SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, etc. Some of them give you objectives, there are plenty of challenges to do, and you just find yourself getting involved in some cartoonishly stupid scenarios. The game is physics based, and the physics, yeah, they're pretty whack. They are all over the place, and the game very much does remind me of Goat Simulator in that sense, where everything's just a little broken on purpose, where you're falling through the map, you're flying into the sky, and nothing seems to ever work exactly like how it should. And the game knows this. It expects you to kind of break it. You even complete challenges for, I'll just say, pushing the game to its limits. None of the challenges or objectives, events, whatever you want to call these, are particularly challenging or complex or nuanced or anything beyond surface level, but I found it entertaining for a few hours. Look, you can beat the game in like 2 or 3 hours, and if you want 100% it, including a platinum, yeah, it probably won't take you more than 5, maybe 6 hours. It's just dumb fun. And sometimes you need just dumb, stupid games like this. I know I certainly do need a palate cleanser from time to time, and I think this game was good at that. It's also dirt cheap, so that certainly helps things, and at the end of the day, it really is just a licensed kids game, so the fact that it's actually even okay, I think that's pretty good. Well, Blood on the Sand wasn't the only third-person shooter for this list. We also have Family Guy Back to the Multiverse. Now, I remember when this game came out, I actually rented it from Redbox. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but yeah, I rented the game and beat it in a weekend, and I thought it was actually pretty enjoyable, especially for it being based off of Family Guy, which, I'll just be real, is just kind of all over the place when it comes to quality, but I feel like this game pretty much fell off the radar immediately and has been just completely forgotten at this point. It was delisted long ago, and that's a real shame because I thought the game was rather entertaining. So it is obviously based off of Family Guy, and it sees Stewie and Brian going after Bertram across several different universes trying to stop him. Yeah, I guess it was a little ahead of the MCU doing the whole multiverse thing, but you gotta remember this concept has existed for quite some time. The story is pretty entertaining, it's Family Guy, what do you really expect? The voice acting is totally on point, and the game actually does have a good sense of humor. It had me laugh out loud plenty of times. The game itself is a pretty standard third-person shooter. You get to play as either Stewie or Brian. Stewie has a bunch of sci-fi weapons, and Brian has more realistic weaponry, and you pretty much just blast everything in sight. You go through a number of colorful, varied universes, and even though you are just kind of mindlessly shooting everything, the game still has an alright amount of variety, and the game has plenty of funny ass moments, like where you recreate the JFK assassination. There's one point where you get to play as Peter and fight the chicken. Yeah, the game certainly will be making you laugh. It won't be making you laugh for a long time though. I remember beating it in like 4, maybe 5 hours, and there is some multiplayer and some other content to it, but you're here for a good time, not a long time with this game. I think it's a decent little shooter that has been pretty much wiped off the face of the planet. And even if you absolutely despise Family Guy, you're just a Simpsons fan through and through, I think even you'll find something to like with this one. I know the game wasn't crazy well received when it came out, but looking back, I think it's okay. So here's a game that I can't believe I didn't include in my first underrated licensed games video, and that is Evil Dead Regeneration. Now, the Evil Dead franchise has been around for a very long time, and it's great that it's still around even nowadays. But when it comes to video games, I feel like this series has a pretty shaky track record. Some games are just absolutely awful, and some of them are actually alright. I think the best of them all is Evil Dead Regeneration. This game came out in 2005 and actually tells a what-if story where what if the third film, Army of Darkness, never happened, where after all the crazy stuff in the second movie happened, Ash wasn't sent back in time. And I think it's actually really interesting. I wish more games did this. This is a really unique take on the series. Of course, it still involves Ash fighting tons of Deadites and the Necronomicon being used for evil, but I still think it's pretty cool. The game also has Bruce Campbell voicing Ash, which will never not be a great thing. When it comes to actually playing the game, it's a pretty basic hack and slash that you would expect from the mid-2000s. Ash doesn't have this crazy moveset, he doesn't have all these combos and strings and abilities, no. He gets his basic tools and that's all he needs. Chainsaw for a hand, shotgun, and a few other weapons, and really, that's all he needs to kick some ass. Thankfully, unlike the prior Evil Dead game, you don't need fuel for the chainsaw, you can just use it whenever you want. And the combat actually feels alright. It certainly won't wow you, it is not DMC out here, it is rather shrimplistic, but I think it gets the job done. The game also does have a little variety thanks to Sam, this new character who's the very rare friendly Deadite, and Ash pretty much just beats the crap out of him, but you also get to play as him and you'll need him in order to get through some environments and solve some basic puzzles. The pacing is good, the game isn't too long, and it's just some dumb fun. There's also a good amount of fan service for the Evil Dead franchise, and I think that even fans of newer Evil Dead media are still gonna find some fun with this game. It's cheesy, it's corny, it's a bit silly, and at times it is rather over the top, but I still found it to be entertaining, and yeah, here we are 20 years later, and I still don't think there's been an Evil Dead game that's been as good as this. Even that newer Evil Dead game from a few years ago that was totally not Dead by Daylight, yeah, I'd rather play Regeneration on the PS2 all these years later. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I like this game. Well, the Patrick Star game was not the only licensed game from 2024. We also have The Quiet Place: A Road Ahead. Now, The Quiet Place movies, they sure are interesting, but I've actually never seen any of them. I don't really know all that much about them except the twist, and so I went into this game pretty blind, and I ended up thinking it was alright. I'm not going to act like this is one of the best modern horror games of all time, but I think the game was way better than most people would expect. I saw this game, I saw the trailer and just went, oh boy, is this another Walking Dead survival instinct? Is this about to be awful? No, it's actually better than that. And I think it tries to do a few really unique things. Like the movies, it's all about sound. These creatures hunt you with sound, and so you have to try to be as quiet as possible. You can even turn on your microphone like in real life to pick up on things, and this is how I think the game is best experienced, where you actually have to try to be quiet as you play through the game. The story takes place well after these creatures have shown up, and it's about you just trying to get as far away from them as possible. The story and characters are just kind of whatever in this game, and I didn't really care for it, but it wasn't unbelievably terrible, and I could say the same about the gameplay. You are moving very slow when you do anything in this game, and to some that might be really boring, but I thought there was a certain level of tension, and the game spooked me quite a bit. You'll have to open doors slowly, you can't really run anywhere, you'll have to distract the monster with other sounds, and you really got to worry about what you're walking on. For instance, sometimes you'll have to go over water, which pretty much just is a dead giveaway as to where you are, so you'll have to pour sand over the water. You really got to avoid broken glass. You really got to be careful about everything you're doing, and I actually thought this was a cool concept. I think it could be really improved on in like a sequel, but I think for a first attempt, it's okay. Is this game stellar? No, but I think that it's a little underrated, and I actually walked away from this one a bit surprised. It's around the 6 or 7 hour mark, and I played a hell of a lot worse, that's all I'll tell you. Maybe if I had seen the movies or knew the source material a bit more, I would enjoy it more, but I think that says something about the game's quality if even I enjoyed the game without really knowing much about the series. So here's one that I could never gas up enough, and that is The Wolf Among Us. I don't feel like this one is all that underrated, especially not nowadays, but I feel like it doesn't get the same love that Telltale's The Walking Dead got, and I think this game is just as good, if not better than the whole Walking Dead series. Like, it's fantastic. If you haven't played it before, well, don't worry. I'll keep things brief here. I don't want to spoil anything. It is a Telltale adventure game in the style of the Walking Dead games from the 2010s, where there's not a lot of gameplay. It's all about making choices, the occasional quick time event, and from time to time you'll get to walk around in an area and examine things. There's no puzzles or action sequences or anything like that. It's based off of the comic book series Fables, where essentially all of the Fable characters move to New York and have to live a modern life, and it's very dark, filled with plenty of upsetting moments, and this game sees you playing as the sheriff, Bigby Wolf, who's just trying to lay down the law when a conspiracy shows up, and yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff going on with the story in this game, and it's so good. The voice acting is fantastic, the story's unpredictable, there's a lot of twists and turns. I found it to be just incredibly interesting, and it truly had me on the edge of my seat. Something else that I love is that the choices actually mean something in this game, way more than most Telltale games. Some of the choices you make in like episode 1 will affect episode 5, the last one, and you can get some drastically different endings. I think out of all the Telltale games, this is the most replayable one easily, and I feel like not enough people gave this game credit for just how replayable it was. The game has an incredible art style, the cell shading just goes off, the music is good, and yeah, it's just a wonderful game that I've actually played through more than once myself because it's just that good. I've been waiting for the sequel for like ever, it feels like. I don't know if it's ever actually going to come, but I'll totally check it out when it finally does, if it finally does. I'll totally check it out if it ever actually does come out. In the meantime, we're always gonna have this first one, and it's so good. So here we have a last minute addition to the list. I originally was not going to have this game on it, but it was brought up by a buddy, and I went, you know what? That actually is an underrated licensed game, and it's the Chicken Little game that came out in the mid-2000s. Funny enough, this was one of the first GameCube games I ever played. I remember getting it for Christmas that year, and I absolutely loved it. The game was stupid difficult, but I loved it. I've come back to the game now, and you know what? The game ain't that bad. Is it great? No, but it is charming, and it's still very playable even nowadays. As for the Chicken Little movie, I actually quite liked it even though it was pretty short, and I thought the movie had plenty of funny moments.
You have hate mail.
I'm truly sorry. That wasn't very funny.
You have more hate mail.
Side note, I don't know why, but whenever I see Chicken Little, I think of Scott the Woz now. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, I liked the movie. I thought it had pretty good animation, and so naturally I wanted to play the game. I got the game, and it's a fun little action-adventure game. It doesn't really focus on one gameplay style per se. Like, there's some 3D platforming, but there's some grinding. At one point, it's a rhythm game. It's just kind of all over the place. For the most part, you play as Chicken Little, but you actually get to play as some of the other characters like Abby, Runt, and the fish out of water. And I think the way everything comes together is alright. I'm not going to say that the gameplay is particularly engrossing or all that exciting, but it is somewhat entertaining. The game is pretty short. I remember the movie being really short. The game is under 4 hours long. It's not difficult at all nowadays. And hey, I can appreciate that they tried to do something different for every single level. Not all of them are the same, and the game certainly won't have you bored thanks to that variety. There are some secret baseball cards that you can get throughout these levels. There is multiplayer, but I've actually never tried it all these years later. And I think the game still looks okay nowadays. The OST is also kind of fire for this game, which I wouldn't have expected. The game actually has been re-released. It is available on Steam, which is kind of crazy. A lot of these other games aren't, but Chicken Little, you know what, if you want to play this in modern day, you absolutely can. They must have done something right since this game actually did get a sequel, but I have yet to play it. Chicken Little game ranking video coming? Does anybody want to see that? I doubt it, but this game is better than you would expect, especially considering the movie it's based off of, and it was a fun trip down memory lane. And the game is Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3. I wanted at least one driving game on here, and it's, in my opinion, one of the more underrated Nickelodeon games from the last decade or so. If you couldn't tell, this is the third game in the kart racer series, and really it's the only one that's any good in my opinion. The first one had some serious issues, the second one fixed things a little bit, and the third one, it's actually a decent little kart racer. When it comes to the actual racing itself, it feels okay. Look, this isn't Mario Kart 8, this isn't Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform, but it's acceptable. The cars feel okay. At times, the drifting can actually feel kind of nice, and you can easily get a hang on the vehicles. The physics are not half bad either. I sure have played a lot worse, even in this series. Something that I like about this game is the character roster. I think the roster is actually pretty great. There's a ton of Nickelodeon characters here, from a lot of the classics to even some of the more new stuff. I don't really care for a lot of the new stuff, but I'm happy that they got such a wide range. I think it's actually pretty cool. And when it comes to the tracks, I think their design is acceptable. A lot of the stuff from the previous game comes back, but there's a number of new tracks here. And look, there's no all-timers here. You're not going to be blown away by the track design, but it's okay. I think you can still have some fun with it, and I like the slime theme. Look, it sounds like I'm giving a bunch of backhanded comments here, but I will say I did have fun with this game. I enjoyed my time with this game. Did I absolutely love it? No. But the game was better than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be just some licensed shovelware garbage, and it's actually quite a bit better than that. If you like racers, if you're looking for a kart racer before the new Mario Kart or Sonic or Kirby Air Ride comes out, and if you like Nickelodeon, you really could do a hell of a lot worse. Like, way worse when it comes to Nickelodeon kart racers. I did a whole video ranking all the Nickelodeon kart racers. There's that many of them. Alright, that's it for today's video. We talked about some underrated licensed games. If you want to see part 3, you let me know down below. The code word, there is no code word. You have to tell me an underrated licensed game that you like. You get a little heart, little from me. As always, stay safe everyone. Bye-bye now. So here's a real classic with Scarface, The World Is Yours. This came out in the early to mid 2000s and was actually developed by Radical Entertainment, the people who would make Hulk Ultimate Destruction and eventually the prototype games. So they have a very real pedigree here, and they actually made a video game that was not only based on the Scarface movie, but it's actually a sequel to it as well. It plays a what-if scenario where Tony is not killed at the end of the movie and he exacts his revenge and takes his entire empire back. And I think that's actually pretty cool. It's pretty rare when a licensed game actually strays away from the original source material like this. The only other time I can think of really is The Matrix Path of Neo. But I think that was more of like a little Easter egg, a little wink and nudge. This is an entire game, and it's actually a pretty good game as well. The game very much is a GTA clone, or a GTA-like, as reductive as that sounds, but I mean, it's an open world crime game that sees you driving around, killing people, committing crimes, selling drugs, and a whole lot of swearing, and it's actually pretty decent. No, it's not the greatest open world game you're ever going to play. Yes, Saints Row is better, but it's still an enjoyable, fun few hours. The cars feel nice enough to drive, you can actually get some real speed, the environment and vibes are absolutely there, the combat is sufficient enough, and the game's got a good pace to it. I would really recommend this to people who are fans of Scarface. As somebody who's never actually seen Scarface, I think this game is just pretty decent. But I feel like I would really enjoy this if I knew the source material even just a little bit better, because it's clear they were big fans of said source material. This game was allegedly getting a remaster, but the remaster seems to have been pulled or something. I'm not really sure what's happening. But I hope it comes out sooner than later, because I think more people should be experiencing this one. It's a pretty underrated title from this era. So the next one we got here is a real classic with Batman for the NES. Obviously there have been plenty of Batman games throughout the years, but I think a lot of people have forgotten just how good the original NES game is. I'm actually not the biggest NES guy, I actually don't care for most NES games, but I've always loved Batman on NES. This game actually just hits different. So it sees you playing as Nightwing. No, that's not right. No, it sees you playing as that other fella, Batman, yeah, that one. It sees you playing as Batman as he takes on several of his iconic villains, and it's a balls to the walls difficult 2D platformer. This is a pretty challenging game, but it's also a very rewarding game. Batman has a pretty interesting moveset. He can throw punches like he's a rock'em sock'em robot, he can wall jump, and he even has a few special abilities, like when he summons a gun, yeah, he just can get a straight up gun. Which I feel like I would be more mad about lore and accuracy until I remember that this game is difficult as shit and that the gun is super useful. And you don't actually kill anybody, they just straight up vanish here. Yes though, the game is rather difficult due to precise platforming, enemies just hitting like an absolute truck and not like a shitty Ford pickup or a Cybertruck. We're talking like an 18-wheeler here. They can absolutely decimate you, and the game does require a certain level of skill to beat. If you're not good, you just will not be able to finish this game, shrimple as that. But I do very much think it's worth it. I think it's one of those games where you will die over and over, but you'll become so familiar and good with these levels that eventually you'll just move like a pro and you'll feel like you're Spider-Man or Batman. On top of this, the game has this really moody, dark aesthetic and vibe to it that I've always really resonated with, and the music actually slaps here. There's some real bangers. Batman on NES, it's way better than you might think it's going to be. So here's one that I've gassed up plenty of times and will continue to gas this one up with Hello Kitty Island Adventure. Hello Kitty has had plenty of games throughout the years, but the only one worth a damn really is Hello Kitty Island Adventure. This is easily one of the most chill, relaxing video games I have ever played, and it's way better than you would expect. It's a rather cozy life sim that has a lot of similarities to Animal Crossing, but it also does a number of different things on its own. Like there actually is some platforming, there's some puzzle solving, and you do complete quests. You get to make your own animal, and then you get to hang out with Kitty and all of my other favorite Sanri hoes. They've actually got like everybody here too, even some of the more obscure characters. Then they can hang out with you, they can go on quests with you, and they even give out missions of their own. This is a very peaceful game that is most certainly not going to be for everybody. If you're somebody who needs your games really involved or action-packed, or you don't like these kind of cozy games, no, you're not going to enjoy this. But if you're somebody who's even kind of open to the idea, I think you can have some fun with this. I promise you, Kitty does not have a gun to the back of my head for me to say this. I actually do enjoy the game. I played like 6, maybe 7 hours of it last year, and yeah, it was one of the most peaceful games I've ever played in my entire life. It was really relaxing. At times, some of the objectives definitely feel like they are made for lobotomized grannies or toddlers, or somewhere in between, which might be me. But from time to time, the game will make you do something that requires a little bit of brain power, and again, it's just so cute. It's such a cute little fun experience. The game was originally a mobile title for Apple Arcade, but I'm so glad that it's on consoles and PC now. It can be played in its entirety. There's no microtransactions here whatsoever, and yeah, it's actually pretty decent. So I feel like this one's a pretty deep cut with Aliens Infestation, which released for the DS in 2011. Yeah, when was the last time I talked about a DS game? So this one is just way better than you might expect. It was actually developed by WayForward, the people who would make the Shantae series, and this is a 2D Metroidvania set in the Aliens universe. And I would say that it really is a mix of Contra and the Shantae series. Funny enough, WayForward also made a Contra game, so that's probably why it feels so much like Contra. When it comes to the weapons and the shooting, it is actually pretty accurate to Aliens in general, and it actually does feel good. Of course, with it being on the DS, it takes a second to get used to everything, but it controls more than well enough. Something that I really actually do like about this game is there is a good attention to detail, especially for a DS game. They actually do clearly care about the Alien and Aliens franchise. There is a lot of throwbacks, callbacks, and it's got way better fan service than a majority of Alien video games out there. Certainly better than Colonial Marines. I know everybody points to Alien Isolation as like the Alien game, and don't get it twisted, Alien Isolation is definitely better and more accurate, but man, Alien Infestation ain't so bad either. This game is way better than you would expect. It's got a good pace to it, the exploration is decent enough, and fighting the aliens really never got old for me. The sprite work is surprisingly good, and the game's got a good atmosphere to it. You won't be with this one a stupidly long time. It's not one of the largest Metroidvanias of them all, but I think it ends before it truly starts to get old. It doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but I certainly think it's interesting to see Aliens of all properties get a Metroidvania for the DS of all things, and for it to actually be good, yeah, I think that's pretty remarkable and is totally a hidden gem. So here's another that just really does deserve a lot more attention, and that is Strong Bad's cool game for attractive people. Now at first you might be going, is that really the name of the game? Yes, it absolutely is. And second off, who the hell is Strong Bad? Well, you might recognize him from Poker Night at the Inventory, but he actually was part of another franchise, a licensed franchise, Homestar Runner, where, funny enough, he was actually not the main protagonist. In fact, sometimes he was the antagonist because he was such a little asshole. But in the late 2000s, Telltale Games, yes, Walking Dead, Sam & Max, and Wolf Among Us Telltale Games actually gave him his own game, and it is a point-and-click adventure game. And wouldn't you know, it's actually pretty decent. It is much better than you would expect, that's for sure. When you look at this game, your first thought is probably, oh, this is either a Flash game or some kind of a joke, but this is neither of those, I assure you. The game uses the rather simple and basic presentation that Homestar Runner itself uses, so it's very true to the source material, and yeah, it's a point-and-click adventure game. If you've ever played one of these, you'll immediately understand how it works. The gameplay isn't exactly the most involved. You walk around areas, you click on things, you interact with characters in the world, you solve puzzles, you pick up items, you use them with other items or characters or the world. Rinse and repeat for 5 in-game episodes because this game was actually released episodically. This was back when Telltale was doing this, and yeah, it's actually good. The gameplay is obviously not the focus here. The focus is the story, characters, writing, dialogue, etc., and that's where the game is actually quite good. This is a very funny game. Strong Bad is hilarious, and his interactions with the other characters are great. Each episode very much does have its own story, and there's not really an overarching narrative here. You can play the episodes pretty much out of order, and it's not going to matter all that much. And I found them all to be rather entertaining. I actually remember playing this on the Wii, and then I played it on Steam a few years ago, and both times I've thought it's pretty good. It's not one of Telltale's absolute best, but I still think it's rather entertaining for the most part. Unfortunately, the game has been delisted off of all platforms and was never released physically, so if you want to play it nowadays, you either got to go to Internet Archive or you got to go find some WiiWare ROMs. Hopefully it gets re-released sooner than later. I have a feeling this is going to get re-released eventually, maybe, hopefully. At least brought back to Steam or put on GOG, maybe. Either way, check this one out. So for this next one, I actually got a double header, that being Hot Wheels Unleashed 1 and 2. Now, when you hear Hot Wheels video game, you probably think of some baby game where the average player is so young that they're just drooling all over the controller and they start sucking on it before the end of the race. But no, Hot Wheels Unleashed is actually legit. Both of these games are actually great, and they're some of the best arcade racers of the 2020s. They are just actually good arcade racers. Both of them feature little story modes that are kind of whatever, but see you racing on a variety of different tracks. I love the way both of these games look. It's all of the orange, reddish tracks literally put together, so you're just racing around someone's house and there's all these tracks everywhere. It's super cool. It reminds me of when I played with Hot Wheels when I was a little kid, and it's got a great visual to it. And it certainly helps that both games actually do look pretty decent even nowadays. But where these games succeed is in 2 key areas: the vehicle selection and then the driving itself. Both of these games feature really great rosters when it comes to the vehicles. There's some very deep cuts here when it comes to Hot Wheels cars. There's so much variety. There's dozens of vehicles in both of these games, and a lot of them actually do handle super differently from each other. It's not just a skin or anything like that, and you can actually upgrade the vehicles, and the way you get them in both games is a little different. It's a little sus, but I think it's so cool how many cars are here. When they got all the new cars, but they also got cars that I personally had when I was a kid, color me impressed. The other thing about the game is the driving. It actually does feel really nice. The game has a great sense of speed. You drift around, you go flying off these big jumps. The game is actually incredibly thrilling when it comes to the racing. And again, it depends on which vehicle you've got. There's a little bit of variety. You're not just race the entire time. The second game even features boss fights. I think both of these games are actually pretty good. They're worth your time, and they're some of the best licensed games of the last few years. They're not some of the most high profile ones, but they're still pretty good. So for this entry, I don't just have 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. No, I've actually just got a whole host of games here, that being basically every Toy Story video game ever made. Yeah, would you really expect that Toy Story actually has a pretty solid track record when it comes to video games? There was that original game on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo by Traveler's Tales, yes, Lego Traveler's Tales, that might have been stupidly difficult, like way too difficult, but it actually is kinda alright, and the music does slap for it. Then there was Toy Story 2, one of the best licensed 3D platformers of the 90s. It's actually really good. It's easily the best Toy Story game of them all. I would argue it's better than a lot of other 3D platformers from the 90s. Let me say it again, the Toy Story 3D platformer is actually one of the better 3D platformers from this generation, the same generation with like Rayman 2, Mario 64, Crash, etc. That's just how surprisingly good 2 is. There was a Toy Story 3 video game that was actually pretty solid as well. And depending on which version you're playing, it could go from kinda all the way to, wow, this is actually pretty good. There was even some good Toy Story spin-offs like the racing game. It was only released for PS1, and yeah, it's way better than you would imagine. It's a half-decent racing game. They even made a game for Toy Story Mania, which is based off of the Disneyland ride, and that, yeah, it's actually another decent rail shooter, better than you would expect. None of these games are absolutely exceptional, but I think they're all hidden gems, and again, they're all better than what I think the general person would assume. The only other Disney series I think with more consistently good games is probably Cars, but it's pretty neck and neck between the two, which is honestly awesome. So the next one is another classic that just does not get the attention it deserves with Star Wars Episode 1 Battle for Naboo. Now, The Phantom Menace is a movie, well, we could be here all day debating whether or not it's any good, but what I think we can all agree on is that we got some pretty kick-ass games based off of Episode 1, and this absolutely is one of them. So this game was actually developed by Factor 5, the people who made Star Wars Rogue Squadron, and this game very much is a spiritual successor to Rogue Squadron. It doesn't have the word Rogue Squadron in the name, well, I guess that's actually 2 words. It doesn't have those words in the name, but trust me, this is basically a Rogue Squadron game. In some ways, it's actually better than the first Rogue Squadron as well, and I feel like it's just been completely forgotten about. I always see people reminiscing about Rogue Squadron 1 and 2, especially 2, but I never see anybody bring up Battle for Naboo, and in some ways I understand. See, Rogue Squadron 1 and 2 are based off of several different Star Wars movies. This really is just Episode 1. It is just stuff from Episode 1. And if you're somebody who absolutely despises Episode 1 or the prequels, you might not be too inclined to like this game, but hear me out for a second. The gameplay is actually solid. It is very much in the same vein as the Rogue Squadron games, where it's a fast-paced arcade shooter, where you're flying around in a ship blasting everything in sight. The game does have 15 different missions, and there actually is a fair amount of variety here. Not every single mission sees you in a ship. You're not in the Naboo starfighter every single level, just a lot of them. And there's actually a good amount of variety here, and the game has no trouble keeping things interesting and engaging. The game also controls surprisingly well. It's really easy to pick up and understand what's going on here. It isn't super complicated or complex. It's just like Rogue Squadron. The frame rate, unfortunately, is just like Rogue Squadron. At least on N64, it can get pretty choppy, but that's just kind of a thing with a lot of N64 games, unfortunately. The game does have all the Episode 1 music, which is awesome. There's even a secret code where you can unlock a Buick. But this game's actually pretty good. I'm not going to say that, it's one of the greatest Star Wars games ever, but it's one of the better ones, and I feel like you wouldn't know that due to just how little people talk about it, and I enjoyed it. So naturally, I think others would as well. And speaking of N64 classics that don't get enough attention, we have Mickey Speedway USA. And you might be going, really? You're including the old Mickey racing game from ages ago? Hell yeah, I'm including the old Mickey racing game from ages ago. This game was way better than you would imagine. This game was actually developed by Rareware, the people who made GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing, and while it's not their best game on the console, not by a landslide, it's way better than it has any right to be. It's certainly not going to dethrone Diddy Kong Racing or Mario Kart 64, and it is a rather simplistic kart racer by comparison, but I still found some entertainment and enjoyment with this. The game looks nice enough, it has a really cute vibe and aesthetic to it. It's all about Mickey, driving across the United States and racing his friends. It controls well enough, the frame rate is surprisingly solid, and it has just this nice aesthetic to it. When it comes to the actual racing itself, yeah, it doesn't have a great sense of speed, but I still think it gets the job done. The track design is rather simplistic as well, but sometimes it's okay to have a more chill kart racer. At least the items, for the most part, are rather balanced. There's nothing here that's stupidly broken, and I think you'll get at least a few hours of fun with it. And when it comes to Mickey Mouse specific video games, I would argue that Mickey Speedway USA is actually one of the very best ones. It's up there with Illusion of Gaia, and I had fun with it not only when I was a kid, but as an adult as well, and I think it's become pretty underrated throughout the years. I don't see anybody clamoring for it to get re-released, and so it seems like it's going to be one of those forgotten gems. And then the last game we have for today is actually the newest game with Nicktoons The Dice of Destiny. This one came out in 2025 and immediately just flew under the radar. Even though it's not actually that bad, it's much better than most Nicktoons video games, and I think it's actually got a rather interesting premise. It's essentially Nicktoons Diablo. Yeah, this is essentially baby's first isometric action RPG. It is incredibly similar to Diablo in so many aspects, complete with cooldowns, all the typical RPG loot you would expect a game like this to have, and various dungeons that you gotta go through. When it comes to this game's premise and setup, it is actually pretty interesting. Timmy Turner, yes, Fairly Odd Parents is finally back, is essentially playing D&D, and he wants it to be more exciting and somehow ends up in the game, and then a bunch of other Nickelodeon characters are here. When it comes to the roster of characters, it's pretty decent. Of course, your mainstays are here: SpongeBob, TMNT, Jimmy Neutron, etc., but it feels like there's a lot deeper cuts here. It feels like they're targeting the younger and older generation, which is pretty cool. I also do enjoy this game's aesthetic and art style. At first I was kind of like, what the hell is this? But the more I played it, the more I really did resonate with it. It's got a unique, charming vibe to it, and the game runs flawlessly. While this isn't exactly the deepest RPG or longest, I think it stays entertaining throughout the entire experience. It's only around a 5 or 6 hour game, but it's a good 5 to 6 hours. It doesn't ever get stale or repetitive or you want it to end. It ends long before that happens. I like how all the characters are different, and they all have their different pros, cons, etc. I think if you enjoy Nicktoons, especially older Nicktoons, this one might be worth checking out. I've already seen it for almost dirt cheap at this point, and the game is not even 1 year old as I'm recording this video. Upon first glance, it might absolutely look like shovelware, just licensed garbage, but no, there's a good game actually under here. A rather underrated hidden gem is under here. And really, that's always great to see. And there you have it, 40 awesome underrated licensed gems. What are some of your favorites? Let me know down below.